Hey guys, in today's video I bring you an unbelievable and revealing story. Let's meet Solène Whitmore, a nurse who literally died for 4 minutes and came back with a powerful message about the greatest spiritual battle of all time. During her near-death experience, she was taken to a heavenly realm, where Jesus revealed Lucifer's true destiny and how his fall still affects humanity today. What she saw on the other side changed her life forever, and it could change yours too. So, before we start, leave your like, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any content like this, and activate the bell to receive all notifications. Now, get ready for an intense and surprising journey. The hospital was buzzing with the usual emergency chaos. Node Northview Medical Center, the screams of patients, the sound of heart monitors, and the rhythmic click of doctors' footsteps created an uninterrupted symphony of life and death. For me, that was normal. It was my world, my refuge. I always believed I had everything under control. He spent more time there than at home, saving lives, comforting families, facing despair with the firmness of someone who had seen it all. But that night, everything would change. The emergency radio exploded into static before the operator's urgent voice broke out. Code red, multiple injuries in collision on I-90. Prepare for the biggest wave of the night. A strong beat in the chest. Something about the operator's tone made my skin crawl. I passed my hand over my sweaty forehead and took a deep breath before heading towards the emergency entrance. The automatic doors opened with a mechanical hiss, and soon paramedics were rushing in, pushing stretchers and shouting information. Serious head injury, intermittent loss of consciousness, deep laceration to abdomen, weak pulse, 3rd-degree burns. We need morphine now. The floor was covered in traces of fresh blood. I took a deep breath, erasing any hesitation. My hands knew what to do. I went from patient to patient, stabilizing, giving instructions to the team, trying to organize the chaos. It was then that I heard someone shout, "Another ambulance arriving. We need help here." I turned around too quickly. I rushed to answer it, but my foot slid on something warm and sticky. Blood. Time slowed down. I felt my body float for a moment before impact. The dry sound of my head hitting metal echoed like thunder inside my skull. The pain came in a white flash. A dull ringing filled my ears. The cold floor against my face. Voices distorting around me. "She fell. Someone call a doctor. She's bleeding a lot." My world began to disappear. The sound became distant. Then there was only silence. An absolute silence. And darkness. The darkness gradually dissipated, like morning mists that melt away at the touch of the sun. First came the feeling of lightness. There was no pain, no fear, no confusion, just a peace I had never experienced before, a peace that not only enveloped me but seemed to come from within myself, as if I had become part of it. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer in the hospital. It floated in a space that defied all earthly logic. The ground beneath me wasn't solid, but neither was it air. The sky above was not blue, but rather an infinite field of golden and white light, pulsing like a living heart. Everything seemed to glow, but not in a blinding way. It was as if the atmosphere itself vibrated with a soft, welcoming warmth. My breathing was calm, controlled, or rather, I didn't even need to breathe. I just existed, and that was enough. Then I realized I wasn't alone. An immense presence began to manifest itself in front of me. It didn't appear suddenly, but rather as if it had always been there, and only now could my eyes see it. A figure walked towards me. The moment I saw him, I knew who he was. Jesus. Not because someone told me, not even because I recognized him from paintings or stories, but because my soul just knew. His presence radiated something indescribable, a pure love, so intense that it made me feel small, but at the same time completely accepted, as if I were facing the greatest secret in the universe, and, at the same time, facing a dear friend. He didn't need to say anything. His simple existence spoke louder than any words. Even so, he smiled slightly and called my name. Solemn. The sound of his voice was like a calm river flowing through me. It wasn't sound. It was felt. My throat tightened. Was I dead? I died. My voice came out hesitant, almost childish. For a brief moment. Yes, he replied, his voice thick with compassion. But there's something you need to see before you go back. I tried to understand his words, but before I could ask any questions, the scenery around me began to change. The soft light turned into something much more vast, A new world was about to be revealed. The world around me changed in an instant. The comforting golden light that surrounded me began to expand, dissolving into something even grander. Suddenly, I was in a vast celestial realm, unlike anything my mind could conceive. In front of me stretched an indescribable landscape, structures of pure light, vibrating in golden and silver tones, as if they were made of living energy. The sky sparkled with millions of stars that didn't seem distant, but rather part of that place. The air carried a melody that came not from an instrument but from the environment itself, a celestial song that filled everything around me. And then, in the center of that realm, my attention was captured by a singular figure. He stood above the others, radiating a splendor that surpassed even the heavenly light around him. His body seemed to be made of liquid crystal, reflecting all the colors of creation. Its wings were immense, each feather shining as if forged from precious stones. His presence was magnetic, his face serene and his posture proud. He was, without a doubt, the most beautiful being I have ever seen. I didn't need to ask. I knew who he was. "It is," said Jesus beside me, his voice firm and solemn. "It's Lucifer, just like he used to be." My heart sank. Lucifer, but that being was majestic, immaculate. How could he be the same person I knew from stories, the personification of evil? But then, something changed. A subtle, almost imperceptible detail. He looked down at the reflection of himself in the golden floors of the sky. His gaze lingered a little longer than it should have. It was not simple contemplation. It was admiration. Time seemed frozen as I watched the scene. He raised his head and looked around. For the first time, his eyes didn't carry gratitude or reverence, but comparison. "Here pride was born," muttered Jesus beside me. The change was slow but relentless. First, a subtle glow of dissatisfaction, then a slight frown as he observed the other angels around him. I saw his expressions change as he began to move away from his true nature. "I am the most beautiful," he whispered. "I am the most powerful. Why should I bow down?" And so the fall began. He didn't become a monster overnight. First, it was just a thought, then a seed planted in the hearts of other angels. And before they knew it, a third of the sky was poisoned by their words. The celestial grandeur was about to transform into the universe's first battlefield. The sky shook. At first, it was just a subtle vibration, like distant thunder, but soon the light around them began to pulse with a different intensity, as if the very fabric of the sky was preparing for something immense. Lucifer, now shrouded in a defiant glow, was no longer just admiring his own image. He was rallying his followers. Why must we bow?" Her voice resounded, firm and enchanting. "We who are made of light, who are powerful and immortal, why should we accept a lordship over us? If God made us great, then should we not be equal to him?" His eyes glowed with a cold fire, and his presence seemed to bend the reality around him. He walked among the angels with a magnetism that was almost irresistible. Many hesitated. I could see their uncertain expressions, their eyes wavering between fidelity and doubt. "Lucifer sowed dissatisfaction," explained Jesus next to me. "He didn't start a war with guns. He started it with words." The angels began to divide. Some backed away from Lucifer in fear, but others began to gather around him, their wings glowing with new energy, as if they were ignited by the same ambition that now consumed their leader. And then, the decisive moment arrived. Lucifer stood before the heavenly throne and declared, "I will ascend above the clouds. I will sit on a high mountain. I will be like the Most High." The sky, which was once pure harmony, responded with an overwhelming flash. A second of absolute silence preceded an explosion of energy. An invisible force cut through the air, and everything changed. On the other side of the sky, an imposing presence appeared. Archangel Michael. His light was different from Lucifer's, not bright and seductive, but intense and unwavering. His armor seemed forged from the sky's own light, and his eyes carried no doubt. "There is none other than the Most High." Miguel's voice reverberated like 1,000 storms. "And you, Lucifer, have made your choice." And then, the battle began. But this was not a war like those on Earth. There were no swords. There was no blood. It was a war of primordial forces, of light and darkness colliding with an impact that shook the pillars of creation. Bolts of energy slashed across the sky, each strike carrying the power of the universe. The surrounding space shook, distorted by the magnitude of the impact. The faithful angels and the fallen angels threw themselves at each other, their wings becoming blades of pure energy. The celestial radiance was overshadowed by the flashes of conflict, and at the center of it all, Lucifer was fighting Michael. Each blow exchanged between them caused the firmament to shatter in waves of power. Lucifer was agile, treacherous, his attacks aimed to confuse and manipulate, but Miguel was firm, inflexible. He fought not with anger, but with justice. The sky was collapsing around them. Then, with a final blow, Michael raised his sword of light and, with a voice that echoed throughout creation, proclaimed, "You have no place here anymore." Lucifer was struck by an overwhelming wave of energy. His light body began to twitch, and his radiance was slowly consumed by the shadow. He tried to resist, but it was useless. And then, the fall began. Lucifer and his followers were cast out of heaven. I saw when he fell. He didn't scream. He didn't ask for mercy. It just fell, faster and faster, like a star being ripped from the sky. Behind him, the fallen angels followed the same fate, their lights being swallowed by darkness. And then, there was silence. The sky was different now. Something had been lost forever. Jesus looked at me, his expression serene, but filled with infinite sadness. And thus evil was born. The silence that followed Lucifer's fall was thick, almost suffocating. The heavenly peace was still there, but there was something different, an absence like a missing chord in a perfect symphony. Heaven would never be the same again. Jesus stood by my side, observing the void left by the rebellion. "What happened to them?" I asked, my voice filled with a fear I had never felt before. He turned his gaze to me, and suddenly the scenery around us changed again. Heaven dissolved, and in its place I saw earth, but not earth as we know it. I saw threads of light and darkness intertwining, like veins running through the world, with each shining point of light, an act of love, compassion, faith, but there were also shadows, black torrents that spread, flowing like invisible tentacles that tried to wrap themselves around every human being. When Lucifer fell, Jesus explained, he did not fall alone. He brought with him his ambition, his dissatisfaction, and a burning desire to drag creation to its own ruin. I looked around, trying to understand what I saw. In some places, the darkness was thick, pulsing, as if it dominated everything around it. But in others, the light held on, shining bright enough to drive away the darkness. It was then that I realized this battle was still going on. He cannot destroy creation directly, Jesus continued, but he can try to corrupt it. He whispers lies into the hearts of men, twists truths, plants seeds of doubt, of hatred, of pride. The war did not end in heaven, it just changed the battlefield. I swallowed hard. I had never thought about life that way. I always saw the world as a physical place, governed by laws of nature, without realizing that, in addition to the visible, there was a constant clash happening in dimensions that my eyes could never see. Jesus then showed me something even deeper. I saw moments in the history of humanity, moments when darkness had managed to take over the hearts of men, wars, massacres, terrible injustices. Every act of human cruelty seemed to be fueled by those dark threads that seeped into minds and hearts. But then, I saw something that made me catch my breath. The light always came back on. Even in humanity's darkest moments, there was always someone who rose up with an act of kindness. A doctor who saved lives amid destruction, a mother who forgave her son's killer, a man who gave his life to protect a stranger. And when these acts happened, the light expanded, pushing the darkness back. "Love will always be stronger," Jesus said, his voice full of conviction. "But each human being needs to choose which side they will be on." I felt my heart squeeze. How many times had I been indifferent to this battle? How many times have I ignored the small decisions that could strengthen the light or fuel the darkness? Jesus looked me in the eyes. "Now that you've seen it, you can no longer pretend you don't know. Every choice counts. Every act of love strengthens the light. Every act of selfishness gives way to the darkness. Do you understand now?" I understood, and I could never forget. The world before me pulsed between light and shadows. I saw how each choice, each act of kindness or cruelty, strengthened one side of this invisible war. My chest tightened. If this battle was so real, why didn't God just eliminate evil once and for all? Jesus seemed to read my thoughts. "Do you want to know why evil still exists?" he said with a patient but deep tone. "Why doesn't God destroy Lucifer and his followers, erasing all pain and suffering from creation?" I nodded. The answer seemed obvious. If God was all-powerful, why didn't he eradicate darkness forever? Because if he did that, freedom would cease to exist. I frowned. "I don't understand." Jesus reached out his hand, and suddenly a new vision took shape before me. I saw a garden of vibrant flowers, shining as if they were made of living light. In the middle of it, there was a man and a woman, Adam and Eve, but around them, something dark writhed, a hidden presence. When God created human beings, Jesus explained, he gave them a gift that even angels could not fully understand: free will. The vision has changed. Now, I saw children playing, a couple hugging, a man helping a stranger on the street. Small gestures, but each one emanated a light that resonated throughout the cosmos. True love can only exist if there is a choice, Jesus continued. If people didn't have the option to make mistakes, to fall, to move away from God, then love would not be a voluntary act, but an obligation. My heart sank. I had never thought of it that way. "Would you force someone to love you?" he asked, his deep eyes staring at me. I shook my head. Forced love was not love. "Exactly," he said with a slight smile. "God desires a true relationship with his creation, not servants programmed to obey him. Therefore, he allowed even the angels to have free will, and Lucifer made his choice." The images around me changed again. Now, I've seen moments in people's lives. A woman choosing to forgive rather than seek revenge. A man deciding to be honest even when he could benefit from lying. And then I saw the opposite. A person being consumed by envy. Another choosing pride over humility. And slowly, the black threads that were just lurking before began to envelop them. "Every choice strengthens one side," Jesus said. "But no one is condemned as long as they are alive. There is always time to change, to choose love, to free oneself from the chains of darkness." I sighed. It was a lot to absorb. If it all came down to free will, then every human choice mattered more than I ever imagined. Evil does not exist because God desires it. Jesus continued. Evil exists because love demands freedom. My chest tightened. For the first time, I understood that the world was not just a sequence of chaotic events, but a spiritual battlefield where every decision shaped the destiny of humanity. And the scariest thing, most people didn't realize this. The view around me changed again. I still saw the earth and its intertwined threads of light and darkness, but now something else caught my eye. Between the shadows, between the bonds of love and the bonds of destruction, there were figures that walked silently among humans. Angels. They were everywhere. Some hovered over sleeping children. Others guided hesitant hands that were about to make mistakes. Some seemed to whisper into anxious ears, offering words of hope and courage, while others simply watched, respecting the choices of those they protected. Jesus showed me something extraordinary. The angels were not mere spectators. They intervened, but never forced. When a person prayed, their light increased, and the angels could act more intensely. But when someone chose the path of pride, envy, or hatred, their connection to the light weakened, and darkness found space to spread. The angels who remained faithful to God are no ordinary warriors, said Jesus. They do not fight with physical swords. They protect and guide, sustain, but always respect free will. Then I saw something that made me catch my breath. The angels who sided with God were not just obedient, they loved deeply. There was a radiant joy in serving, a genuine happiness in seeing creation prosper. They didn't want power or glory, they simply took joy in existing to fulfill their purpose. I saw Miguel again. He was imposing, but without pride. I saw lesser angels that had never been mentioned in Scripture, working diligently to maintain order on earth, reinforcing the bonds of light between people. But I also saw that they were crying. When a soul turned away from God, when a person deliberately chose darkness, the angels who protected him could do nothing but watch. They respected the choice, and they cried, because they knew the fate that awaited those who rejected the light. Jesus looked at me. They know that every soul is precious. They do not see humans as inferior. They see them as brothers. I had never imagined this. I always thought of angels as distant, like heavenly figures who looked down on us, indifferent to our suffering. But there was the truth. They loved in a way I could never understand. And then I understood the other part of this vision. If faithful angels were like this, what must the fallen angels have been like before the rebellion? The weight of this realization crashed over me like thunder. Lucifer was not just a being of pride. He had been someone loved, someone who shared that same joy before he lost himself in himself. And even after everything, God never hated him. Love was always there, but love doesn't force anyone to stay. I closed my eyes, trying to absorb everything. There was something overwhelmingly beautiful and tragic about this truth. The scenery around me began to change once again. The earth, with its threads of light and darkness, seemed to move away, as if we were rising to a higher point, from where everything could be seen from a new perspective. Jesus stood by my side, his presence radiating peace, but also something else, a sense of urgency. Now that you have seen the past and understand the present, he said, I'll show you a glimpse of the future. My breathing quickened. A glimpse of the future. What did this mean? Then the vision began. At first I saw scattered images, moments that formed and dissolved quickly, as if time were unfolding before me. I saw bustling cities, people living their lives as if nothing but this world mattered. But something was spreading in the shadows. There was a growing unrest in humanity. Conflicts increased. Pride and selfishness became stronger. People's radiance began to fade, as if the threads of light that connected each soul to the Creator were becoming more fragile. And then I saw something even more alarming. I saw the darkness intensify, not as a sudden explosion, but as a slow infiltration, spreading through small acts of corruption, of greed, of indifference. I saw nations turning against each other, not just in physical but spiritual wars. I saw faith being ridiculed, the truth being distorted, people turning away from what could save them. My heart sank. Is this going to happen? I asked, feeling a lump in my throat. Jesus looked at me with a serene expression, but full of depth. The future is not set in stone, he replied. What you see are possibilities. It all depends on humanity's choices. I wanted to believe that everything could change, but then I saw something else. I saw a moment where all seemed lost, where darkness had spread so much that the world seemed to be sinking into chaos. But even there, in the worst-case scenario, something unexpected happened. A beam of light pierced the darkness. First, small, then, stronger. And then I realized it wasn't just one light, but many, small points of brightness that began to come together, to form a network, a resistance against the darkness. I saw ordinary people, doctors, teachers, mothers, children, choosing love over hate, compassion over coldness, truth over convenience. And with each choice, the darkness receded. Love will always be stronger, Jesus said softly, but each person needs to choose it. The images began to disappear. I blinked, trying to record everything in my mind. The future was not a fixed destination. It was a field of possibilities, shaped by the decisions of each human being. And then, Jesus spoke again, with a voice full of tenderness and power. The time you have on earth is precious. Use it to strengthen the light. I nodded, feeling something inside me change irrevocably. I couldn't be the same again after that. Vision began to dissolve around me. The light, the angels, heaven itself seemed to recede like a slowly receding tide. A deep feeling of loss came over me. A hope. I tried to hold on to that reality, that presence, but it was too late. Jesus looked at me tenderly. It's time to go back, Solène. My chest tightened. I didn't want to go back. How could I return to the world after having seen all that? After feeling the absolute peace of heaven? After understanding the invisible spiritual battle that was taking place around humanity? What should I do when I wake up? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jesus approached and, with infinite kindness, placed his hand on my forehead. The warmth of his touch spread throughout my being, filling me with something indescribable. Love, courage, purpose. Remember what you saw. Share it. Live with purpose. Every choice matters. Before I could respond, I was pulled away. It was like falling through a whirlpool of light and shadows. The feeling of lightness disappeared, replaced by something dense, heavy. There was pain. My chest felt like it was being crushed. My lungs were burning. And then, I woke up. The sound of the heart monitors went off in a deafening whistle. "She's back," someone shouted. Air invaded my lungs all at once, making me gasp violently. My vision was blurry, but I saw faces above me. Doctors, nurses, hands moving tubes and equipment. The smell of disinfectant and blood took over my senses. I was back at the hospital. The voices around me were frantic. Ice code blue reversed. Pressure stabilizing. We shocked twice. I thought we lost. My heart was still racing, but not from the fear of death, for the shock of being alive again. Dr. Malcolm Everett appeared at my side, his face serious, but his eyes wide with disbelief. "Solen, did you hear anything? Did you feel anything?" I looked at him. How to explain? How could I put into words what I had seen, what I had learned? I tried to speak, but my voice broke. Only one thing was clear. I was no longer the same. I had seen heaven, and now, nothing in the world could be the same as before. The following days were a whirlwind. I was alive. Against all odds, my heart started beating again after 4 minutes of stopping. Doctors called it a rare case of complete neurological recovery, but I knew the truth. It wasn't a medical miracle. It was a calling. My body was in the hospital, but my mind still wandered between heaven and earth. Every time I closed my eyes, I relived the moment of Lucifer's fall, the threads of light and darkness spreading across the world, the invisible choices that shaped humanity's destiny. The question echoed in my mind over and over again. What do I do now? I tried to ignore it. I tried to convince myself that it had all been a delirium caused by a lack of oxygen in the brain. But whenever I saw a patient suffering, an argument between doctors and nurses, a news story on TV talking about wars and injustice, I saw something else. I saw the spiritual struggle, and, worse, I saw how most people didn't even realize they were participating in it. The morning of my discharge, I sat on the edge of the hospital bed, watching the sun's rays filter through the blinds. My body was weak, but my soul felt electric, restless. Dr. Malcolm Everett entered the room, holding my clipboard. He was always a skeptical man, driven by logic and science. But at that moment, he seemed hesitant. "Are you ready to go home?" he asked, crossing his arms. I just nodded, still not knowing what to say. He closed the clipboard and took a deep breath. "Solen, I saw your EKG. Your heart stopped. Your brain was without oxygen for too long. But here you are, speaking, thinking clearly." He paused before continuing. "Did you see anything while you were gone?" I could have lied. I could have said I didn't remember anything. But then I remembered Jesus' touch on my forehead. I remembered what he had told me. My voice was firm. "And you're not ready to listen?" Malcolm let out a short laugh, but there was something nervous about him. "Tent." So, I counted. Not everything, but enough. About light, about indescribable peace, about how reality is much broader than we imagine, about how true love requires choice, about how evil infiltrates in subtle ways, distorting truths and moving us away from God. He listened to me in silence. When I finished, he sat back in his chair, his eyes lost somewhere on the floor. "I don't know what I believe, Solen," he admitted, "but something happened to you. That's undeniable." Smile slightly. "It's not what I saw that matters, Malcolm. It's what you choose to see from now on." He didn't respond, but I saw something in his eyes that wasn't there before. Doubt, curiosity, maybe even faith. When I left the hospital that afternoon, the cold Chicago wind blew against my face. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of my experience. I went back, but something inside me died forever. My indifference to what is beyond this world. Now, I knew the truth. Spiritual warfare is not a metaphor. It's real, and every choice we make is a battle won or lost. I didn't know how, but I had a mission now. Share the truth, helping people see the light. Because if there's anything I learned from that near-death experience, it's this. Love will always win, but only if we choose to fight for it. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.